To what are we paying attention? Well, on Thursday of this last week, I suddenly ended up officiating a celebration of life for one of the founding members of the other congregation I serve, the Open Circle Fellowship in Fond du Lac. His name was Gene Moore. Well, Gene Moore was 91 years old and was a remarkable person. He was always smiling, always enthusiastic, always personable. And so when I read his obituary, I was startled by the first couple of sentences. It said, Gene was born in 1934 in a Salvation Army hospital in Ottumwa, Iowa, to a young teen mother. He was adopted by a widow who had paranoid schizophrenia and had a very difficult childhood. And I thought about that. That's the kind of circumstances when you read about, you go, ooh, that kid's going to have a hard life, is probably not going to make it. However, the very next line talked about a very unusual transformation from a tragic upbringing. It said, he attended the University of Iowa before enlisted in the U.S. Army. This was during the Korean War, where he was a medic stationed in New Mexico. He then went to medical school at the University of Iowa and then practiced psychiatry in Fond du Lac for 35 years. It's like, wow. Well, Gene loved interacting with all kinds of people. It didn't matter who you were. He particularly loved sports cars, motorcycles, and racing. This was his diversion from some pretty troubled times in his personal life. And if you can imagine being a psychiatrist for 35 years, think of all the really troubled encounters you'd have with your patients. So he was on the medical support team at Road America in Elkhart Lake from the moment it started up in its founding, and still was hanging out there in the medical tent last season on race days at 90. Gene and his spouse Linda, the love of his life, truly, built an amazing Frank Lloyd Wright-inspired home in the woods on the edge of Fond du Lac, and they were lovers of nature and careful environmental stewards. They were very, very instrumental, along with another couple, in starting the Open Circle Fellowship in 2004. And the very first meeting to try to get people who might be interested was held in their home. So through the 25 plus years since its founding, the Moores have been big contributors of their time and financial resources. Unfortunately, in the last decade, Linda began suffering from increased memory loss and dementia. And since the beginning of the pandemic, Gene and a few caregivers, who, by the way, I met and are lovely, had been supporting Linda at home, and so he never felt he could leave on Sunday morning, so he hadn't been attending in person for years. He would Zoom in every Sunday, and you could see his name up on the screen, but usually the camera wasn't on, and you knew he was probably listening in while he took care of her. About 6 months ago, Linda needed to move into a full-time memory care facility, and he visited her every day. Gene began then attending services in person and seemed thrilled to be able to be physically present with his Unitarian Universalist family. And then it's kind of the cutest thing. Often on Sundays when I was speaking, so it's the opposite Sundays when I'm not here, he would always be the last person in the building after everybody else left. And then he'd tell me story after story after story in the kitchen for about another hour. He found great solace in this congregation, and particularly the men's group, which held Zoom meetings, so half of them Zoom in, and it's every other week. So that was a real help to him. So this memorial service that I was leading, the participants clearly came from all walks of life. It was really cool to see that. I think most of the people were split between Road America. I actually asked them if they'd come from Road America, because from the time we found out that there was going to be the service, and I found out on Tuesday and it happened on Thursday. So I wasn't sure if Road America knew about it. Half the people were from Road America. The other half were from the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. Then the three really beautiful long-term caregivers and his grown daughter and her partner. Actually, his wife wasn't there because she was pretty agitated, and so chose to stay behind. So as I mingled, I went to the visitation. I was mingling and talking to all kinds of people. It was pretty clear that they held a variety of religious and political points of view. Yet when they were asked to share memories of Gene, and that's how I do memorial services, just like here, sharing joys and sorrows, it's an open mic. And so they were sharing stories, and they spoke of his love of life and friendship and generosity to a person. They said Gene was a great listener. He just got you. You felt very, very comfortable around him, like you were sitting in your living room just talking. So I wanted to go into so much detail about Gene this morning because to me he represents the type of person that I strive to be, that I hope we all strive to be, and that what he valued in life is probably what we should be paying attention to. So I want to take some time to move away from that experience with Gene and lead you to your own experiences. So I want you to take your time to think about times when you've been surrounded by people who just get you, who accept you, who make you feel comfortable being your authentic self. And I know often people will say, well, it's my family, but that's not always the case. Sometimes families are the last place that works. So it can be an adopted family. It can be anywhere. But think about the times in life when you've been surrounded by people who get you, accept you, and make you feel comfortable or authentic. Just kind of hold those in your mind. And then in addition to it, might be the same group or a different group. Think about times you were in a group of very interesting, stimulating people who might not be anything like you, culturally, religiously, socioeconomically, but they clearly share your same values. So it's something about your common values that's drawn you to them, and you find each other very, very interesting. So like I said, it could be the same group or not. So in the order of service today, I did a reference to a poem called Gratitude by Mary Oliver, who, if you're new to Unitarian Universalism, Mary Oliver is the poet laureate of Unitarian Universalism. The poem is very long, and Mary Oliver goes out into nature all the time and just becomes one with nature. You can just tell that her spirit just goes over the prairie or the sunset or the sunrise or the geese or whatever she's talking about, and somehow the spirits come back to her, and then she writes these beautiful lines of poetry. So in this one, called Gratitude, she asks herself these questions as if these are the questions she always asks when she's in these spiritual moments. And then she writes what she sees and what her answers are, which I didn't give you. So I thought it would be interesting to help you think of these kind of situations today, to think of these questions that Mary Oliver gave us. So again, a place where you just feel comfortable and completely at ease with who you are with, and or it also might be some place where everybody's quite different, but you're very stimulated and interested in them because you share similar values. So she would say, what did you notice? What did you hear? What did you admire? What astonished you? What would you like to see again? What was most tender? What was most wonderful? And what did you think was happening? I like that last one. So I gave you that as something to think about, but I want to take you back to our shared values chart. To my knowledge, I don't think we have this image anywhere in this building, but at Open Circle, an artist painted this freehand on the wall right when you enter the sanctuary. And so I just love that she did this. And so to familiarize you with it, if you're not haven't seen it before, these are the 6 shared values that Unitarian Universalism, through a democratic process, has agreed we all share. There's a lot of detail under each one of them, of course. And then they're different colors to draw the eye, and I know the colors have meanings as well. But they all swirl around a flaming chalice, which since World War II has become the symbol of Unitarian Universalist congregations. And then with this beautiful calligraphy style, love in the center, to remind us that the shared values are not in and of themselves. It's all about pointing towards a love-centered life, is what the image is supposed to say. And so if you think about it, look at the bottom ones, the yellow one, the black one, and the orange one. It's justice, equity, and interdependence. We're tremendously proud in our history of the leadership we've had in the justice and equity area. Particularly, it goes all the way back to the abolition of slavery in the 19th century. And then there was the whole civil rights movement and every rights movement in the 20th century, leading to Black Lives Matter movements and all the anti-ICE stuff that's going on right now. So we are always very, very involved in that. And then interdependence, that value has, of course, many, many meanings, but mostly Unitarian Universalists bring up the idea of climate change and human involvement with it and environmental sustainability. So those 3 on the bottom we talk a lot about. The top 3 we don't pay that much attention to. Transformation, pluralism, and generosity, and that's really what I wanted to focus on today. Transformation, that's a big word. And so in this context, to me, it means we believe everyone deserves dignity and the right to grow, to transform. Or theologically, we would say no one is doomed by original sin or the circumstances into which they were born. Pluralism also is a big word. Mostly, if you look it up, it will say religious pluralism, but we kind of take it bigger and think of it almost as the same as diversity. So we honor and encourage diversity of spiritual and religious paths, clearly. And then we strive to create safe and encouraging spaces where authenticity is encouraged. And then generosity. Where does your head go first? Money, right? That's what we usually think of, but I don't think of it that way. I see that word and I think generosity of spirit, because that's what I see in Unitarian Universalists. We are unbelievable eternal optimists that this horrible stuff will go away and there will be a better world. The world will come to its senses. That is Unitarian Universalist theology in a nutshell, in my opinion. So I see that and I think generosity of spirit. But it's also generosity of time. Showing up no matter what. I'm always surprised there'll be a blizzard out there and all y'all will just show up for the service. That's great. Helping out wherever you think you are needed or are able to help. And then, of course, generosity of financial support. And here's the deal. We aren't focused on the amount. I know there are some religious organizations that have I don't know what it is, a fee or something or a percent of your income, then they want your tax returns so that they know that you've done it. I mean, no, that's not us. We're not focused on the amount. I think we're focused on that it needs to be an act of intentional giving. It needs to be important in your life. So you've thought about it, and it's very intentional about what you're giving. So these are the values, I think, that we experience and seek out continuously in our congregation. I think the other 3 are more outward-facing to the world. These 3 at the top are more inward-facing in how we relate to one another. I would also say that these 3 values are the values that make this a sacred space. Unlike more traditional religions, we don't ask for deity to enter this space and make it holy. I'm hearing echoes of my upbringing in fundamentalist Christianity. But rather, we make it sacred and holy because of the Spirit connected with these values: transformation, pluralism, and generosity. These are what makes this place feel like home and membership feel like family. To me, they are what we should be paying attention to. And they are how we nourish this spiritual home. So I'm going to conclude to just remind you that we are in the cycle of the year where we begin to plan for the coming program year, which starts in July. The title of my message today is To what are we paying attention? And really what I meant by that, if you looked at the subtitle, was, are we paying attention to the right things? Are we giving the right kind of attention to United and sustaining it as a thriving spiritual home? United is one of those unique places filled with people like Jean. And when I asked you to think of those kind of places, I hope many of you thought of this place. People who truly share our belief in the values of transformation, pluralism, and the generosity of spirit. United is home through all stages of life. And when it's your turn for us to celebrate your life like I did Jean, we will be blessed by having known you here as well.